Round two. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Round two, Mr. Dolan, how will you handle a $19 million budget shortfall in 2011 and a $20 million budget shortfall in 2012?
Well, Leon, I am the only candidate here who's dealt with significant budget deficits. I served as the House Chairman of the Finance Committee, where I was responsible for a $54 billion budget. When I took it over, it was $56 billion. So we've cut, through my experience, we've cut $2 billion from government. So it's going to take, first, to understand that the relationship between the county and the state, half of our dollars come from the state and the federal government through the state. So being an advocate down in Columbus, knowing where the money comes from, being relieved from some of the mandates that cost us money is going to be essential. Up in Cuyahoga County, it's going to create a more effective government. We're going to reduce 6 human services departments to 1. We're going to reduce collective bargaining agreements to 1. We're going to make sure that we're hiring the best and the brightest who can do the job at a more effective level, which saves operational costs throughout the term. We're also going to look at contract management. If you look at the county now, there's multiple contracts. We can reduce those to 1 and save dollars.
Thank you so much. Mr. David Ellison, how would you handle a $19 million budget shortfall in 2011 and a $20 million shortfall in 2012?
You know, the event that provoked me to take a more active role in the county's future was when the county commissioners bought the Ameritrust building for $20 million and then proposed spending another $10 to tear it down to create a $30 million empty lot in downtown Cleveland. And now I guess we've invested almost $40 million in that project. If there's that much money in the county government to spend on a poorly planned project like that, I think with a careful review of the budget, it'll be easy to save $19 million in the first year and $20 million in the second year. I've been told that there's a reserve of over $130 million. If, in fact, we go through that budget and find that every single item is well planned and well spent, then we can fall back on that. If it takes across-the-board cuts in every single program across the county, we'll have a balanced budget. But I think that we can handle that kind of budget problem.
Mr. Edward Fitzgerald, how would you handle a $19 million budget shortfall in 2011 and a $20 million budget shortfall in 2012?
Right. Well, I've dealt with similar situations. When I took over as mayor of the city of Lakewood, we had the biggest projected budget deficit in our history. It was to such an extent that the state auditor's office, we actually invited them in and said, listen, we're having trouble. We want to identify efficiencies. And as I sit here today, our operational expenditures in terms of personnel are over 20% less. And we didn't do that by cutting across the board, because when you cut across the board, that means that every single program is evaluated as being absolutely equal to every other one. And that really isn't the way to handle it. You have to make value judgments. You have to scrutinize every single expenditure. Nothing can be taken for granted just because it was funded last year. And if you do that, you're constantly driving towards efficiency, and you're constantly looking for consolidation and regionalization of services, I think we can get there.
Ms. Hamilton Brown, we'll ask you the same question. How would you handle a $19 million budget shortfall in 2011 and a $20 million shortfall in 2012?
I, too, have had experience in working with large operating budgets, and it begins with identifying priorities and having a plan for services. The county has a very complex budget, from health and human services, roads and bridges, to justice services. We really need to know first the source of funds where the deficits are coming from, because all of the funds that come into the county, many of them have restricted uses. So identifying the source and then looking at priorities. Finally, we will look at areas where we have redundancies, whether they're HR services, budget and accounting, as well as IT, that happen in multiple departments. We can have shared services and create a major cost savings with that.
Mr. Ken Lancy, will ask you the same question. How would you handle a $19 million budget shortfall in 2011 and a $20 million shortfall in 2012?
Well, as I stated earlier, Leon, I have been to over 60 of the agencies in the county and met with the directors. I've already identified areas of opportunity where we'll be able to actually increase some income in those agencies. I've also identified areas where I'd also be able to cut. Much of those have already been said. The thing that concerns me the most, and I really don't worry about the $19 and $20 million. I mean, I've done turnarounds for 40 years. I go in when companies have very little income and have a lot of problems. So my experience is understanding that you have to grow yourself out of this problem. The $2 billion that we already have in construction, all right, that's been approved and will be built, okay, is going to be our way to grow out of our problem. My biggest concern is that the state fireball that's being sent us of this $8 billion shortfall, that is going to affect all the counties, and that's what our state legislature has given us. We need to do something, and soon, having that dialogue, okay, and not leave it as the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about.
Mr. Tim McCormick, what about that $19 million budget shortfall in 2011, $20 million in 2012? How would you handle it?
Mr. Bibb, I think it's a good deal more serious than $19 and $20 million. With the just referenced $6 to $8 billion shortfall for the state of Ohio, most of that money is sent back to the counties to run mental retardation, mental health programs, hunger programs, foreclosure programs. We have got to be ready. Evidently, this group of county commissioners is going to hand over to us a major deficit. We've got to be ready January 1st to make significant reductions. I've called for across the board to begin with until things stabilize. Otherwise, we're going to reach the end of the year with a major shortfall.
Mr. Scipione, the same question for you. $19 million budget shortfall next year, $20 million projected in 2012. How would you handle it?
Leon, ditto to both Ken and Tim. The real worry is the $8 billion state deficit and how it's going to affect us. So that's what we really have to worry about. This could be a much bigger problem. But having said that, the restructuring and the reorganization of the county government is estimated to probably provide between $15 and $50 million in savings. That savings, some people have suggested, be put toward economic development. No, it's got to go into dealing with the services that are provided. A big prospect for saving a lot of money is by dealing with the infrastructure of the software and computer systems in the county. They need to be brought to the 21st century. There's huge savings, huge potential savings to be had there. For example, they don't talk to one another, so no department knows what the other department is doing, and there's lots of savings to be had there.
Mr. Voinovich, how would you handle a $19 million budget shortfall next year and a $20 million in 2012?
Leon, I wish it were just a $19 million and a $20 million problem. I'm a CPA. I've spent hours with my staff going over that budget. Unfortunately, it's going to be worse than that. What we're going to do is we're going to tear that budget apart, and we're going to understand what's going to happen to our sales taxes, what's going to happen to our property taxes, and what's actually going to happen from the state of Ohio. And I think when we look at those numbers, it's going to be a lot worse. And my 2020 program is going to create jobs and create jobs and create jobs, because until and unless we get that done, we're not going to be able to eliminate the deficit. We've got to get the real estate tax revenues up. I don't mean raise taxes, but the revenues up, get people buying things, sales tax up to eliminate the budget. And the last thing and the easiest thing to do is have better procurement policies, because the county does not do a good job of using good supply chain management techniques to get that done.
Okay. This is the 2010 Cuyahoga County Executive Forum. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back after this.